Hi there, welcome to my first attempt at a gaming review. Recently I've noticed that most of the game review shows at least I watch out there, they generally don't give you an overview of the entire experience of the game, and they'll tell you their opinion based on the first hour or so. Now, I am aware there are other reviews out there that do play games to 100% completion, but they focus mostly on, is it worth playing the game to 100% completion? And they don't really tell you much of the plot or the gameplay as you're going through it. What I'm attempting to do is to bridge the gap between the two and give you my opinion, as these games are basically going to be new ones to me that I've not played all the way through. So the opinion I'll be giving will be one of someone who's never experienced these games to 100% completion before. So without further delay, I'll open up with my review of Starfox on the Snes. Starfox, released in 1993 for the Snes, otherwise known as Starwing to us in the PAL region because there was an Atari game with the same name already existing. Naturally, by Nintendo, as I'm sure you're all aware. Now, as far as I can tell, it was one of the first rail shooters of this kind. It featured two different camera angles which alternated between which stage you were on, as well as the ability to change the ship's speed at times in order to get past obstacles, or hold back and wait for the screen to clear. I can honestly say that I've never beat this game, despite the fact I was a fan of all the other games in the series. In fact, similar games growing up, such as the Star Wars arcade games, and even Starblade Alpha. In fact, now that I've said it out loud, there was a lot of games that I played growing up with Star in the title. I'm not quite sure why. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I remember this game being fantastic and rather a feat for the hardware at the time, as it was one of the first games, if not the first, that used the Super Effects chip. I particularly remember playing it on the tutorial screen for ages as a kid, swearing that that was the game. But it's definitely something I still don't think that we get in games anymore. It's a good way of letting you have a feel for the controls before you even start playing. Plus, if we had this in modern gaming, we wouldn't need tutorials that hold your hand as much as they do. Now, another thing here that's unique about this game that I can safely say I've not seen outside of the series is that you can choose one of the paths through the game as opposed to a difficulty setting. From what I can understand, the default path is the easy path, the upper path is medium, and the lower one is the hardest, with warps which allow you to travel between difficulties if you're lucky enough to find them, or look it up in a magazine or on the internet.
Good luck.
The opening scramble sequence. Now this bothered the hell out of me as a kid, as it seemed to last forever. That, and I didn't really understand what it meant. I actually thought as a kid that it was something to do with X. This is Corneria. It's under attack, and they've decided to send out General Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club as a last resort to save the day. You'd have thought with these being the crack squad, as they are, that they would have been sent out a bit sooner in order to minimise casualties and perhaps end the conflict quicker. Just saying. Now the first thing you'll notice with these graphics is there's next to no texturing. It's as basic as it can get. The background looks fairly nice, and at least they tried with having a gradient to represent the ground from the distance versus to what's close up. But unless you like your different shades of grey...
That's the new military grey bit there, and that's the dowdy old nasty ocean grey bit there. Or is it the other way around?
You're gonna get pretty sick of it fairly quickly. So, in the opening level, you get introduced to everything pretty much. Travelling through certain paths will make items appear, Slippy will show you that. Your comrades will struggle with other enemies and ask you for your help, and generally will shout at you for being too helpful. I say shouting. I can't really complain about much of this because the Snes does have limited capabilities as far as I'm aware, but a more sort of clear noise for each animal as opposed to just babbling would have been fun or a bit more plausible to listen to. I'm not going to try to explain what the enemies are because, let's be honest, there's nothing explained in the game, so why should we try to justify and differentiate between two different grey shapes? Because that's basically what they are. You just shoot everything and hope for the best. By the time you have a chance to realise what you've shot, it's already blown up. You have your basic weapon, which you can upgrade twice. Once to a double laser, and another to what could only be described in the 90s as plasma. Whether it actually has a name, I do not know, but most walkthroughs and guides I've checked only described it as Twin Laser Type B. You also have Nova Bombs, which are designed to clean the screen in one go, but will only damage things that are actually there and ready to be hit when they explode. If it becomes available after the bomb goes off, it won't be damaged at all. For health power-ups, there are gold and silver rings. Gold restore a small amount of health and generally come out of enemies that you've blown up, whereas silver rings are scripted and will give you a large amount of health back and act as a checkpoint. So ideally, if you see one, you want to go for it. Your basic gameplay aside, let's focus now on what's going on screen. The only thing that's really noticeable in this level that confused me are the little glowing triangles on the corner of the buildings that you can see. They serve no real purpose at all whatsoever, and I actually thought you could blow them up, but no, nothing happens. There are also these robots that run around carrying large blocks. You sustain damage if you run into them, obviously, but they aren't exactly a threat. And it could be just something that lives on Corneria and it's trying to go about its day, but you'll never know because you've already blown them up by the time you think of this. It also appears that Corneria has some serious structural integrity issues, as at one point several poles just fall over for no reason whatsoever. You don't ram them, you don't shoot them, they just drop. I mean, thank God they collapsed now whilst there's a war going on and not whilst some old biddy was out doing a shopping. Did you see anything whilst you were out shopping, dear?
Oh, nothing special, dear. Imperial House has just collapsed again. It's the 4th time this week. You want to get the council round for that?
Okay, here we go. We have the first boss of the game. Now, this boss you should possibly recognise as an alternate boss in Lilac Wars. You generally find it on the first level if you take the alternate route. Shoot its outside cannons off and then just fire away its main body until it explodes. Simple. You're given a quick, clear screen where your comrades in arms tell you how well their ships are doing, and you're given a score based on your destroyed percentage. Then you're sent on your way to the next level. Opening into the second level, the asteroid belt. Most of the levels from now on are set in this sort of environment, but thankfully it means that you can play with a first-person view. It makes the game so much more playable, especially with its limited draw distance. There really isn't much to comment on here, however, as there's nothing really original unique to just this stage. The question I have, though, is that you can't use this first-person view on the planet levels, but the fundamental gameplay is still the same. I really don't understand why it won't let you use it. The boss for this level, though, is apparently a rock crusher. Originally, I questioned the intention of having such a machine in space. But hey, where else would you want one except in an asteroid belt? But for some reason, it isn't doing its job very well because you still have to navigate through about 150 rocks to get to it. But whatever, it dies really easily, you shoot the flashing diamonds on each panel and it blows up. Next stage. Now onto the Space Armada. A little more interesting than the asteroid belt, because at least there are a lot of big ships decorating the environment. You can gain an extra life at some points earlier on in this stage by shooting the 3 pointed triangles that circle each other and flying through the middle. It can be hard to do if you aren't paying attention, and you may miss it the first couple of times. In the later half of the level, you'll find something which I can only describe as a big fridge. You have to fly into it, go through a very long tunnel, and then blow up the reactor by flying through it. I'm not sure why you have to do this rather than shoot it, but hey, it works. Once you've blown 2 of them up, you'll be taken to the last part of the stage. However, if you ignore one by flying around the side of it, the level will loop and all the enemies will respawn. Is that a whale? I mean, I'm not sure, but that definitely looks like a whale to me. This is the problem when you have no textures whatsoever. Shapes just generally look the same as other shapes. I'm really not sure. That looks like a whale. Now, this boss is quite an original one, because you basically fly through a very long tunnel, avoiding several doors, and then you come to this inner court where all of a sudden the laws of physics on R-Wings decides to change, and your R-Wing has the ability to stay stationary in mid-air, whilst the room rotates around you. You have to shoot the 3 panels off the wall to expose the inner core, which you then fire away at until it blows up. Battle Base Meteor. Now, before we start this level, the message from Pepper, he asks you to be careful with his R-Wings. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure that if the R-Wings exploded, these guys would be dead. And considering they're the last hope for the planet, I think he should be more concerned about their safety rather than getting a scratch on the side of the plane. Regardless, this level, it still takes place in space, but it involves running along the surface of a planetoid. So now you get the utter joy of being forced to play it in third person with 2 viewpoints, close to the camera and very close to the camera. This was actually the first point where I died in this run through, not because it was hard, but because I was really struggling to adapt to the third-person camera after using the first-person one for an entire stage. Although at this point, I want to question the purpose in keeping your crewmates alive, because I saved Falco and you don't get thanked for it, he just disappears. Sometimes they hang around behind you and shoot a few things, but it really seems like there's no point in keeping them around at all. Unlike in the sequel, where sometimes the route you take will be determined by which crew members are still with you. The boss, however, is a pretty bizarre one. It spins around quickly and reflects your bullets back at you somehow with amazing accuracy. Before it does that though, it starts off as some form of a giant spider, which upon dealing enough damage, it pulls its legs in and starts spinning. Once you inflict enough damage, it goes into its second phase, where all you have to do is dodge, whilst asking yourself, how useful is this ability I have to change speeds, really? To avoid damage, you only ever have to move out of the way from the boss, which is far simpler than slowing down. So anyway, on to Venom, or rather just above the atmosphere in space above Venom. Coming up to the final area, it's exciting, isn't it? It's another space stage, nothing to see, on to the boss. It's an unusual boss this. It splits itself into 3 parts and you have to shoot the one that is real. The other 2 are fake and won't make any noise when you shoot them, so it's only a matter of seconds for you to find out which one is correct. And once you have got fully upgraded lasers, you'll be going through it in seconds. It's anticlimactic, I know, but hey, now we have to go down to Venom's surface. Now, I don't know if the difficulty just scaled up massively here, or I was so bored that my skill was depreciating, but I actually struggled to get through this the first few times around. There are very few actual enemy ships, and your biggest obstacles are going to be blocks. Yes, long blocks that just appear on screen from the sides, large 3D looking cubes that just materialise in front of you with little warning, and large rectangular blocks that rotate in a direction determined by an arrow on their back. It's not a fight for survival, it's simply a case of being able to navigate around this bizarre planet. The boss, however, is the same one we just fought, only difference now being that you can take him down in one phase, and upon doing so he turns into a brand new boss, which, I'll be honest, isn't really that hard. He'll jump into the camera a few times, you can watch his shadow move away from him, hit the brakes if you're really desperate, and eventually he'll die. And just as a massive coincidence, you'll instantly turn up to the entrance of Andross's lair. Now, after a small bit of dialogue from the big monkey himself, you enter a very large void where you're confronted with the final boss, a giant face. Wow. They really wanted to show off those polygons, didn't they? Shoot him in the eyes, don't let him suck you in, avoid the tiles of doom he spits at you, and he'll open up to reveal his inner self. Another cube. You shoot the cube as fast as you can. I don't know if the bombs work on it, however, but it doesn't hurt to use them if you have them, and eventually you'll win and start flying away to victory. After an explosive exit from the lair, you fly away from the planet, and your crewmates let you know if they survived or not. Nice to know I can count on them to just stand there out the way whilst I do all the hard work. GG, guys. Okay, so we've beat the game now on easy, we're going to switch it up to medium and play the second route. So this means we're going to go around the top this time, and hopefully it'll be a bit more interesting. Well, hang on a minute, I think I've accidentally opened easy again by mistake, hang on. Okay, this time we've definitely opened stage 2-1, although it appears to be identical to stage 1. Although I will say this, it's much more difficult this time round, but nothing too special. What about the boss? Oh, it's the same. Can't really argue then, I guess. I suppose 3-1 will be the same as well, considering it all takes place on the same planet. Let's move on. Sector X. This seems okay for a space level. You can see Cornelia in the background as if it clearly takes place just above the planet's atmosphere. We get that first-person view back, and it requires a bit of precision flying in places. I was quite surprised and actually lost a life or two here, because I simply wasn't ready for it. But there really isn't much else to say, as it's basically the asteroid belt again, but with obstacles that actually require you to think about what you're doing. And I'm going to say it now, the boss is once again the Rock Crusher. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Titania. And, oh, what's this? Different textures. The planet appears to be covered in ice, and it might just be from all the space levels so far, but this is looking really good. I'm genuinely surprised. Now, to begin with, I thought the level was really long, and being really generous with the power-ups it was giving me, but not once did I see a single checkpoint. I died several times before realising that at this point in the stage, it loops. Yes, it took me several continues to realise that when you have 3 doors to choose from, you need to open up the one that has the weather module inside it. And what do you do with that? You fly straight into it. Yes, of course, because that makes sense, doesn't it? No blowing it up or anything like that, but whatever. Doing so, the level actually changes its textures, and I can't believe it. I'm actually struggling to get my head around this. The weather changes. You can see a lot clearer now, and sadly it turns into a bit of a fairly boring level from this point on. Eventually you fly up towards some really bizarre triangular base and enter it. Fly down a long corridor and a robot turns up only to say goodbye, I suppose, and fly away quickly. Bit rude, but alright. Upon leaving the tunnel, you reach an area where there's some form of road or ceiling or bridge above you, and what I can only describe as water below you. See, the fact that I'm actually thinking this might be water indicates that these textures are actually having an impact. It's amazing how just changing the colour is enough to make me believe there's something going on and I'm on a planet. After a few waves of enemies before the boss shows up, Professor Hanger, as he's called, you know, because he hangs from the ceiling. Anyway, it spawns fish. You shoot away at it, it stays completely stationary and you dodge the fish. It isn't really that difficult, but at least the level was a change of pace. Now, you may notice that from this point on, I'm saying less about each level, and that's mainly because there's very little to comment on that's actually unique. The game basically does boil down to a rail shooter with not a lot going on. You also notice I haven't spoke much about the story, and that's because, well, there isn't any. You're the good guys, your home planet's under attack, you need to go and shoot the bad guys. That's pretty much it. Not much else I can comment on in that regard. Following up on the fact there's not really much going on, the next level is again another space level. And even the boss just wasn't really very interesting. Don't let it crush you, you're good to go. I did this in one life and I haven't played it again since. Now we're back up to Venom again, only this time we're entering from a different angle. And wow, we've got some very long pseudo tunnel going on. This is actually an interesting layout. I wonder what they're going to throw at us, because with a wall up on one side there's an opportunity for us to be thrown against it and have to dodge some pretty tight, intense fire. I wonder how it's going to go. Literally, I was so bored playing this level that even after blowing up the incredibly easy boss, I deliberately smashed my own wing off on the wall just to see if I could do it. And unfortunately, there's no point in me showing anymore because the Andros fight is identical to the first one. The only difference being that the inner core of Andros now has 4 faces that can be shot rather than 6. So, on to round 3. Okay, so now we're back on Corneria, although this time it's in the evening. Those shades of grey we previously were made accustomed to are now different.
Looks exactly the same to me.
Now, considering it was basically the same level for the first 2 routes, it's not really surprising me it's much the same for the third. Although, maybe the boss will be a bit different. Oh, hello. Yes, this boss is indeed different. You even have to think about what you're doing to beat it. If you don't shoot the caps on the top, they will reattach to the battleship and anything that you've destroyed will respawn, meaning the fight can go on for quite a while. And onto the asteroid belt, again. Yep, it's the same, blast away at asteroids and ships. You know, it'd be more interesting if something actually happened, or something was... What on earth is that? I'm not quite sure why the asteroids now have faces on them, but for some reason I remember seeing these as a kid, being absolutely terrified. I also think they gravitate towards you, making it a bit harder to avoid them. But seriously, it's not that different, although it is nice to see a new sprite on the playing field. And once again, we have a different boss. This appears to be a recurring theme so far in this playthrough. You actually have to wait for an opportunity to shoot, and be careful what you hit as opposed to being trigger happy. What happens is the boss will spin around and fire tractor beam at you, and if you get caught up in it, you have to barrel roll away to make it get off. Once you've done this, you'll be able to shoot up to 3 of its weak points. However, if you shoot it whilst its limbs are still spinning, it will reflect your bullets back at you, and that will do the most damage. Once you've blown up all 6, the stage ends, on to the next level. Fortuna. It's another planet level, so we're going to have to do it in third person, but maybe we'll get some interesting scenery to look at. Oh, thank God for that, we've got some bright colours. I don't know why, but I'm actually enjoying running through this difficulty. It seems like a completely different game. Whilst there's nothing fundamentally different though, the enemies in here are much more distinguished and you can actually tell them to be animals. So this time you actually know what it is you're killing when you blow them up. After you hit the halfway point, you go out to sea. It was a bit much to expect to see a coastline, but at least the change in scenery is nice. You get the same fish jumping out of the water that we saw in Route 2, and it is still a change. At least now the draw distance isn't what you're fighting against. When you reach the end of the level, you'll be back on muddy terrain, and you'll eventually come up to a boss with a very large tail and 2 heads with long necks. Now, one thing I didn't understand is you're told to shoot it to reduce the length of its neck and tail, but personally I never saw a difference. I just fired away and occasionally even used my brakes. Yes, they'll actually do something in this fight, just hold your own until you manage to blow it up. Sector Z, back in space, back in first person. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually disappointed to be back in this view. There's very little scenery in this level, and most of the obstacles appear to be large blocks, some of which aren't even textured. It just seems really lazy. There's no consistency or logic in how they're connected, and it makes you really think this is more of an obstacle course, not a base that's being built up. One thing I will comment on is this stage is hard. I lost a lot of lives here. Now, the one tip I will give for this level, as it is often regarded as one of the hardest, is most of the obstacles you can ignore by flying on either far end of the screen. In fact, this was the only way I could consistently get through it with full health. So keep that in mind if you ever do play it. The boss is a repeat of the old Route 1 Stage 3 boss. However, this time the panels on the wall will toggle on and off when they're shot, as opposed to blowing up completely. So make sure you're very careful where you shoot so you don't end up wasting time and losing lives like I did. Macbeth. Break a leg. This level is also fairly difficult. There's nothing new I can really comment on though. Occasionally you'll get these volcanoes that explode and you've got a lot of closed-in walls, but it's pretty much more of the same. Just be careful. If there's one tip I would suggest though, it's when you do see a volcano, use your accelerator to get away from it. I've said before it doesn't really seem to do much, but on this occasion it can be the difference between not getting hit and losing over half your shield in one go because of a stray rock. Now, the boss for this stage also isn't really that hard, and in fact the only reason I died on it is because every time I got here I'd have no life from the volcanoes. When I worked that trick out, I got it first go. You shoot the ports on the outside to cause it to open up, revealing its core, hit the brakes whenever it comes in close, and don't let its balls smack you in the face. Once you've shot it enough, it'll explode, so you're on to Venom for the final time. I'm going to skip over what happens when you're above Venom because it is more of the same. There is nothing else I can add here. I'm just going to talk about the boss. The boss for this stage, however, is rather unique. It's sort of like the free range battles that you get in Lilac Wars on the 64. It can be a bit tricky as well because the panels only open up for a very short amount of time. But once you know which ones are left, you'll line yourself up properly and breeze straight through it. The final stage. Now, I really am not expecting anything at this point. It is just a clone of the first Venom level, only with far more obstacles to avoid. It's a lot more difficult getting around, but if you just focus on what you're doing, you'll eventually get through it. The boss, however, this is a little bit unfair. The only way I managed to beat it was to get here with a fully upgraded craft and firing away at its exposed port and just take the hits. It's all I can suggest, unfortunately, but when you do manage to blow it up, you'll be repeating the same final boss you've done twice already. The only difference is this time he has an extra form. It's some sort of weird cat face. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed. I was expecting something a bit more different than that. It's just an extended final boss fight, and the last phase is actually easier than the first phase because the tiles it spits out aren't quite as dense as those you get on the first form. Just shoot it in the eyes, and then shoot the cube that comes, and then that's it, you've won. Now that really is about it. You're giving a final score for the game and a load of end credits. The only thing that bothers me around here is you're giving a brief soundbite of the voice actors talking. Pepper and Fox do a bit of dialogue, and you can actually tell what they're saying.
Come in, Cornelia.
This is Cornelia, Pepper speaking. Congratulations on a job well done.
So it begs the question to ask, why is it that they can speak now, but nobody spoke clearly throughout the whole game? Clearly the Snes is capable of having near realistic voices, as I understood every single word. So why did they not just have one or two generic comments per ship, rather than the just random assortment of noises you get instead? The comment I made earlier on is clearly null and void. Your end credits will roll, however, and then you're shown all the bosses you defeated in a slideshow. Nothing major, and it is the same for all three routes, the only difference is what bosses you killed. Now, before I finish, I've got two more things to add to this, the secret levels. The first of which is available in Route 1's asteroid belt. You fly along as normal until you see what I can only describe as a spinning pole of asteroids. Shoot the middle one and fly immediately through it. Repeat for all three, and one of the creepy face asteroids will appear. Blow that up and you'll find a portal to the black hole. The stage it takes to is really trippy and will repeat forever until you fly through one of the exit rings. You'll be warped to a stage on Route 2 or 3, or straight to Venom on Route 1, depending on which one you use. It is a good opportunity though, as you can fully upgrade your lasers if you've got the patience. And finally, the other dimension. Go to the asteroid belt in Route 3 and blow up the second big boulder. A large bird will appear and flying into it will take you to this unique level. There isn't really much I can say about it though, as it's just messed up. All the enemies are mostly paper aeroplanes, they fly everywhere, and the background is really strange. There's lots of faces and it's all distorted. The boss is in fact a giant slot machine. Yep, that's right. Shoot its handle and see what happens. If you get an Andros face, you get hit. If you get 3 sevens, you'll win the fight. Any good combinations you get will result in coins being spat at you, which you can use to restore your shield. After blowing the slot machine up, you'll get an alternate ending which isn't canon with the rest of the series. You fly through the end credits and you're presented with a disfigured The End screen. Shooting all the letters fixes their orientation and the enemies will work against you to mess them back up. After quite a lot of work, I filled them in only to find nothing happens. This stage loops forever and is really pointless, but I really did enjoy this, as at least you get something different to do. So that was Starwing. I managed to get through the whole thing in the end in about 7 hours, and to be honest, here's my final thoughts if you couldn't work it out by now. I didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought I should. The frame rate felt unnatural, as if the game was built to be played slowed down. There are a lot of times where there's nothing on the screen and you can fire unnaturally fast. This just gives you the impression that the frame rate has finally caught back up to what it should be. The thrusters and the retros generally don't do much, as I've already said. There's a couple of situations where they help, but most of the time they'll just result in you getting hurt. I know most of the problems I have with this game are probably down to hardware limitations, and it was amazing for its time, but it does have lots of flaws that I think just got glossed over, considering it was so good when it first came out visually. Although future games with the Super FX chip apparently had a boosted version which meant the games would run a lot smoother. And believe it or not, sometimes the controls actually work against you, particularly on the boss on Route 3 Stage 4, which took me several continues to beat until I realised that the barrel roll only seems to work 70% of the time. Some of the times you'll be mashing away at L or R trying to dodge bullets and it just looks like you're having some form of a stroke. It just doesn't work, and it thankfully is heavily improved in the 64 version. A lack of a true ending was also disappointing. All 3 routes do the same thing, and owing to how the difficulty scales up, I expected something a bit more, well, dramatic. Maybe a reveal over the whereabouts of Fox's father, considering it's mentioned so often he's gone missing, especially when you go into the black hole. Don't get me wrong, it isn't a bad game by any means, it's just really repetitive and rather dull. The few worlds you encounter are colourful, and in particular I really enjoyed the planet Fortuna. en route 3. I'm not sure what it was that caught my attention, but compared to the sheer amount of space levels in the game, it was nice seeing some scenery, if you can refer to it as that anyway. But this is the thing about polygon-based games. The shapes are so simple that it makes your imagination go into overdrive, and you're willing to believe a stationary cube is a building. Overall, I'm glad the game was released because it did bring a new level of hardware to the Snes, and it was a franchise to Nintendo that did give us some good titles. Admittedly, we haven't seen a good release from them for a while, but I did enjoy Lilac Wars a lot, which is still one of the best rail shooters in my opinion for a console. And the multiplayer aspects on it were fantastic. So on the one hand you have a title that's clearly trying too hard to be visually impressive without keeping the gameplay up, but on the other hand it was the beginning of an era for Nintendo and probably helped push rail shooters into the mainstream consoles and out of arcades. So my final opinion is this. I'd recommend giving it a go if you want to see where the series started and see what the Snes was capable of back in the early days, but if you've played Lilac Wars 64, don't come into this expecting the same experience. You're not going to get it. Rating 7 out of 10. Try it out of curiosity, but there are better games out there. It gets an extra point because of the fact it was the first game with the Super FX chip, and I kind of can't really hold that against it. If you did watch through all this video and you did enjoy it, let me know, because any feedback you give me I'll take on board for when I do my next video, which I am going to start working on straight away. So I have a choice. Piece of shit.
Cut that part out.
Yeah. That'll do. That's your after credits.